good? Here. Okay. Okay. I don't work with a mic often, so very awkward. Hold it closer. Okay. There you go. Okay, cool. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's so wonderful to see so many folks. Keep reminding me to put the mic closer to my face because I know I'm going to forget. My name's Corinne. I work for the City of Philadelphia Office of Sustainability. We work on a multi-agency initiative called Eastwick, From Recovery to Resilience. Some of you might recognize us from quarterly town halls that we hold on Zoom. We've been holding them for 2 years now. And we try to come back every quarter with new information. Whether or not we have updates for you, we still want to come back, provide space to ask questions, share concerns about flooding or about other quality of life questions that you might have. We're trying really hard to work across different departments from the city, state, and federal level to answer questions and to make some change happen in Eastwick. I know it's been a long time that you've been waiting for this event. So yeah, very thankful that you're all here tonight. So I just wanted to thank again all of the partners that we work with throughout the initiative for this event tonight, but for many events that we've had over the last couple of years. If any of you came out to Community Day earlier this summer, we had a lot of different agencies there. Oh, thank you. Yes. Is that good or bad? Good. Okay, perfect. We've had a lot of partners that come share information, come to our town halls, come to our events to engage with you all and to share information. So really want to thank all the partners that that we work with on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis. Also want to thank Eastwick United for helping get the word out about tonight's event. If you got a flyer in your door, it most likely came from somebody from Eastwick United. So want to thank all the time that you put into getting that information out to everybody. So before we start, I'm not the main speaker tonight. We'll be passing it off to Army Corps for the main presentation, but did want to start with some information, some of the things that we've been hearing over the course of our work in Eastwick, and some of the things that we know at this stage. I know I've been hearing from many people that this has been a long time coming. You all have been waiting too long for a solution to the flooding. I know you're tired of the problem being studied. I know you're eager for a solution. So we hear that, and we're really cognizant of that. We are hearing, and we know that the levee is only the levee that you're going to hear more about tonight. It's only a partial solution. It does not solve all sources of flooding that Eastwick is vulnerable to, but it is a very important piece of the broader puzzle. So I don't want to minimize the impact that it will have, but we know that it's not the only thing that we need to be looking at here in Eastwick. We know that we don't want to push the flooding elsewhere. We've heard many concerns that if you build a flood wall here, a levee here, it's just going to push the water elsewhere. We do want to make sure we're not doing that and that we're working with partners to accommodate that water moving elsewhere. We know this is a major milestone. This is a big event. We underestimated how many people would be here tonight, so we know that this is an important event for you all. But we also know that there is still a long road ahead. And I want to make sure that you all know that moving forward depends on several things, but I don't want y'all to forget that moving forward will depend on community approval of the proposed plan. If the community does not want this plan, we need to know that, because then we won't move forward with it. So we need to figure out what the community wants and if they want the city to move forward with this levee proposal. And I also want to acknowledge that no one voice speaks for the community. We know that people have a variety of perspectives. People have been in different situations. We need to hear from a variety of evidence, particularly those most impacted by flooding, to understand how best to move forward. So recognizing that tonight during our Q&A and discussion, we are going to be prioritizing that Eastwick residents, particularly those that have been impacted by flooding, get to speak first and are prioritized in the Q&A portion. So we'll talk about that when we get to our ground rules, but want to make sure that we're hearing from those that have been most impacted first and prioritizing those voices. So kind of acknowledging the bigger picture, I do want to mention, as I mentioned, that the levee is not the only piece of the puzzle. We're working on multiple things. We know that Eastwick is vulnerable to multiple sources of flooding. What has been experienced the most devastatingly is riverine flooding from where the Cobbs and Darby Creek meet. But Eastwick also is vulnerable to other sources of flooding, such as tidal flooding, and will in the future be vulnerable to sea level rise. So because of that, we know that the levee is not a one size fits all. It's not going to solve all of the problems. And we really want to understand how to mitigate all sources of flooding in Eastwick. So we've been working over the years in thinking about something like an Eastwick flood resilience strategy. We received funding from FEMA to start this effort. Sorry for the static. I'm not sure if that's me. Step away. Okay. What we are starting to look at is something that we're calling the Eastwick flood resilience strategy. We know there have been a lot of different ideas and concepts and proposals that have been put on the table from many different partners. And our work over the next couple of years will be putting all of that under one roof and getting to understand how those different measures can work in combination with each other and how to make sure that Eastwick residents are driving that decision-making forward so that residents are deciding what the future of Eastwick will be and what flood resilience in Eastwick will look like. So we're going to be kicking off that effort early next year. And we hope that you'll continue to work with our office and engage with us so we can make sure that your voices are heard as we figure out this longer term strategy. But I know this is all kind of longer term stuff way in the future. And I know that everybody, a lot of people here are really concerned about tomorrow and flooding that might happen in between now and when we're working on these longer term issues. So we are also at the same time looking at some interim strategies to address flooding in the short term. We have a guidebook that was out on the Office of Sustainability table. I believe we still have some more copies at the food table now called the Flood Ready Homes Guide that has some recommendations on what you can do for your home in the meantime. We just developed this guidebook. We really want to hear your feedback if these strategies seem like they're things that can work for you, or if you try them and they don't work. We want to make sure that we're working on strategies that are helpful and useful for you all. So I hope that you pick up one of those guidebooks, and we're really looking forward to your feedback on that. And then we're also looking at the possibility of HESCO barriers as a possible interim flood barrier. If you might have seen them when you walked in, they're these beige like cages. They get filled with soil and compacted, so they create a barrier. They're used across the country for interim flood mitigation, and we're looking at them as a possibility in the same area where the levee is being proposed. So the way that would work, if it does end up that it's feasible, what that could look like is we might put those barriers out in the next 2 or 3 years that might provide some level of protection from storms in the meantime. But then if the levee moves forward, we would take those down and put the levee in its place. So that's what we're currently thinking of and trying to find funding to make that happen as a shorter term solution. So just wanted to let you all know that we're keeping these things in mind. We are trying to work on some of these shorter term measures as well. But I will pass it off now to the Army Corps to talk about the flood risk management draft feasibility study. Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne. I think Miss Natalie's going to put the air conditioning on, so we'll cool off a bit here. And thanks to Miss Natalie, Miss Donna Parks for hosting us here today. Thanks to the Office of Sustainability for all their heroic efforts in making this happen. Unbelievable turnout. We know this project and study is really important to the community, and it's really important to the Army Corps of Engineers as well. Really impressed with the turnout, and we really want to get your comments. That's a big part of what we do when we release a draft report. We've had a lot of meetings where we've heard similar things to what Corinne outlined. The first we always hear is fix the flooding. And we definitely want to point out that we can't quote unquote fix the flooding, but we can attempt to substantially reduce it. And that's what this study has been looking at. So that's the first theme. We hear the frustration about the time that has elapsed. And I will say to that we are further along than we have been ever before. And that's thanks to the advocacy and engagement of the community here. And in recent years, thanks to some of the workers that are here in the room from the city and the Army Corps and other agencies. And then the last thing I'll say, we heard in other meetings, is that people kind of had the impression that the Army Corps was sort of pushing or forcing the levee. That's not our role. Our role is to conduct a feasibility study with sound science to see what might be possible to address a given problem. And of course, in this case, it's flooding. So that's our role. Ultimately, it will be up to the city, as Corinne outlined, whether it wants to partner with the Army Corps for design and implementation. And we know that the city is relying on community input and not just one voice, and all those things Corinne outlined. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over first to Jay Smith. He is the project manager for the study, and he's going to give you a quick overview and then hand things over to Jake Helminiak. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. This is really putting together, sharing information, because that's how we build teamwork and develop a solution together. So this is really great. Thanks to everyone for coming. I'm Jay Smith, project manager for the feasibility study. What I'd like to share this evening briefly is the actual study findings, the tentative study findings, the draft report, and then how you can provide comments on that draft report. That's important. We need your comments. And lastly, if you do nothing else, read the executive summary. It's 7 or 8 pages and summarizes a lot of what we say in the report. So the Army Corps of Engineers is in a great position as we have congressional authority to plan, design, and construct the flood risk management measures that we have been addressing here in Eastwick. We studied, or it's been studied for many, many years, but we finally got authority in 2019 to conduct the study with the Army Corps in association with the city of Philadelphia, our partner. So we released a draft report of this on August 31st. It's out there for comments. Hopefully some of you reviewed it. And what we're identifying as the tentatively selected plan, tentative, is a levee. So tonight's public meeting is a good place to share information, as I said. What we're doing basically is we're looking at conditions with the project and without the project into the future, comparing those two, and we can identify what the damages are, what the benefits are, and what the costs are. And through all that analysis, and not only the levee, but other alternatives, we've identified that the levee is the tentatively selected plan, and it is well justified according to environmental, technical, economic, and environmental justice concerns. Again, this solution, the tentatively selected plan of the levee, is not final. It's based on your comments, which hopefully you're reviewing the report right now. So this is what we're proposing as our tentatively selected plan. In the report, it's a levee. You can see that we have bracketed the potential alternatives for that levee in the green, which is currently the preferred alternative, and the blue. So you can see, if you can see that slide, Eastwick, the community Eastwick is to the bottom of it, and the recreation center is to the lower left. The levee is right out in front here between us and Cobb's Creek. So that levee is basically an earthen embankment of sediment that prevents the overflow, the flooding from a river. As you can see here in the middle, there's a mound of sediment there. That is the levee. It's engineered, it's constructed with life safety and flood risk management in mind. So on the bottom, it's not just putting dirt together in a pile. We use some soil of a certain engineering grade, build that up, put a geotextile cloth on top. On the stream side, there will be some riprap or revetment, and then on the community side, it will be grass line. So it's more aesthetic. We're also working with our engineering with nature folks for natural nature-based features to make sure that it's more aesthetically pleasing with possibly trails and trees on the levee surface. So we anticipate that this levee is going to cost the order of $13 million. And again, it's cost shared between the federal government, the Army Corps, and potential sponsor, the city of Philadelphia. We have to maintain that with association with the city, That's an order of $50,000-$60,000 a year, and significant amount of damage reduction and benefits on an annual and over the project life cycle basis of 50 years. You can see this levee, if you can see the slide, it is higher than, it's built for the 100-year flood. It is higher than a lot of these floods that we were talking about out in the open house. Floyd in 99, Irene, Lee, Isaias in 2011 and 2020. So those types of flood, we will mitigate the damage from those types of floods. So here's the report, the executive summary we shared earlier, and it is 142 pages. All the information is there, very transparent. Again, read, if you can't read the whole report, read the executive summary. It's all in there. It's there are copies here. There's copies at the Eastwick Library. There's copies on the USACE Army Corps website, and we have accepting comments till November 15th. So that's another month plus. So there are several ways to submit comments. You can see here the email, by mail, and we'll consider all comments. So hopefully that in a nutshell is enough to understand and intrigue you to read the report and communicate with us, Steve and Jay Hominiak, who's now going to speak about some of the additional measures we're considering associated with this study.
All right. Thank you, Jay. And I just wanted to again say thank you for the great turnout here. That's what these meetings are all about. So Jay mentioned how beneficial this project is in a monetary sense. So we know that it's just kind of an intro to the next few slides, but we know that by placing a levee, and we've heard this as a concern from many of you, that when we place a levee, we're shunting the flooding either further downstream or further upstream. So we know there are going to be impacts when we place these types of FRM, flood risk management measures. So we've spent the last several months of this study really trying to dial in on how big those impacts are, the magnitude and the extent, how far upstream and downstream that stuff goes. So before we get into that, I just wanted to, as I'm speaking over the next few slides, there'll be some terms. So I just wanted to kind of throw some definitions up here to make sure we're all on the same page. Induced flooding, what we're talking about, those impacts from the WITH project, the levee plan, that's increased flood risk due to that plan. Residual flooding, that's existing flood risk that will still remain. It may be reduced, but not totally eliminated due to the placement of the levee. Additional measures or complementary measures are those features that are in addition to the TSP levee right now. And I will say that's kind of an ongoing analysis. Right now, we've really tried to dial in on what the impacts of a levee would be, but that's not the final answer. So I would view these, as we go through these slides, view these induced flooding estimates as less of a final number and more of a target for mitigation moving forward. So we know what the base levee will do. What can we do to mitigate or soften those impacts? I'm gonna keep going. This is just a base map here showing what I'm trying to show here. I'm not sure if the colors come through, but essentially showing that placement of the levee there in green, any impacts further upstream or downstream don't only affect Philadelphia, they affect Delaware County. And you all are aware of that, but this map just kind of calls that out, that anything we do is going to have potential impacts further upstream and downstream in multiple townships and counties, which is why we're continuing to look at those complementary or additional measures. This is the same map. The yellow dots are now the structural inventory, or every structure or residence within our study area that we're currently looking at. I've labeled a few crossings, both upstream and downstream, that we're going to kind of dial into a little more to kind of understand the magnitude of those impacts. I will say, so there is a ton of detail within the both the H&H analysis within the report, but also the contained within the main text, and even summarized very well within the executive summary. So for these slides, I'm going to dial into one particular event, but try to keep in mind that I didn't look just at this. We didn't look at just this one particular event. We looked at the range of hydrology from, say, a 2-year flow, 2-year recurrence interval up through a really large flood up through the 500-year level. So just keep that in mind. We're going to dial in here a little. So that's the same structural inventory now, showing which properties within that inventory benefit from the levee and which ones would potentially have induced flooding impacts from that levee. So that's just the color coding right now, but let's dial in and look at some particular numbers. So first off, I think it's very important moving through this discussion that we keep in mind scale and context. So Corinne mentioned how devastating the flooding is due to the riverine flooding from Cobbs Creek that we are concentrating on here, right? That's the focus of this study. So the greatest benefits that we're seeing for this 100-year event, occur right behind the levee within like the planet streets. I'm talking about Saturn Place right here specifically, but we're seeing a 6 or 7 foot reduction for this particular event by placing this levee here. So if we move forward to see how that scales with the upstream and downstream impacts, we'll kind of see that moving forward here. Again, to kind of keep this in mind for scale. And I will say there's lots of different ways I can show this. I'm trying to take a general view here and not blab on too much up here to get to the heart of this meeting and get to the Q&A from all you folks and hear from everyone. So, and I will be here for as long as the Q&A takes, so there's no rush there. So we look at the next upstream crossing from Eastwick, which in this case is the B&O Railroad crossing. So on both Cobbs Creek and Darby Creek. What we're seeing, I have 2 numbers here listed because the first number is on the downstream end of this bridge crossing, and the second number is on the upstream side of the crossing. This is only to say, not to be overly complicated, only to say that these crossings themselves function as almost dams themselves. They back up water. So you can see that our induced impacts, potential impacts, are mitigated even just from one crossing. So we'll see this moving forward as you move further upstream in a general sense. As we move further upstream away from the levee, those potential induced impacts are reduced. By the time we get to the upper extent, they are reduced to near zero. By the time we get to the downstream extent with the confluence with the Delaware River, they're also closely reduced to zero. So again, for scale, we're talking on the order of 6 inches to a foot here, as compared to the flooding that we are reducing on the order of 6 feet. And again, that's not to minimize any of these potential impacts, only to say that there's a scale difference there. When we get down to Hook Road, again, probably the closest crossing to the levee itself, we see the greatest impact during this event, essentially during every event that we modeled, because the levee itself right now is sized for, essentially designed to protect against the 100-year flood. That's where we see both the greatest benefit, but also the greatest potential impacts. So that's what we are seeing at Hook Road, again, on the order of a foot, compared to the 6 to 7 foot reductions that we see within portions of Eastwick. If we dial in further downstream, once we make it down to Wanamaker Avenue, again, as we're moving downstream, those flood impacts, potential flood impacts, are being further reduced. Again, mostly because we're going through, the refuge, the marsh has an effect on attenuation and reducing those water levels in general. So that's what we see even in a with levee plan as well. So I mentioned additional measures or complementary measures. They're essentially, like I said, flood risk management features that go along with the levee, in conjunction with the levee. I underlined this to kind of make it a point. This is an ongoing analysis. We don't have all the answers right now in the draft report. It's an ongoing analysis with the multiple federal partners in the area, Fish and Wildlife Service, EPA, FEMA. So we're looking at lots of different measures continually moving forward. That being said, in the report, we have some results for the measures that we've currently looked at. They include floodplain benching or lowering the floodplain for quicker access for floodwaters to occupy at multiple locations. We also looked at small berms at specific locations along the perimeter of Eastwick, kind of to prevent interaction with Darby Creek at really high events. And one of those berm areas was along the SEPTA tracks, kind of preventing that overflow that occurs at really large events. A few of the things we haven't looked at yet are dredging throughout Darby Creek or even up into Cobbs Creek, kind of increasing that channel capacity to potentially lower water surface elevations, which could potentially affect the height of the levee. That, all of the things within the Eastwick, all of the things within this study that we're looking at are very interactive, which is one of the reasons that like the modeled features that we have in the report currently are not off the table. They will likely come back as part of any future complementary measures or mitigation features. And how does that look? If we combine all of those measures that I mentioned, small berm downstream of the landfill, small berm at 86th Street, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service entrance, and a longer, but again, really short, small berm along the SEPTA overflow, along the tracks there. So you can see the pink here is current level of flooding, what would happen at a particular event. And all of those features put together do a really good job, really effective job of reducing any residual flooding or induced flooding within Eastwick itself. We still have the same problem of upstream and downstream impacts. However, again, the scale is different here, where we don't see the same size impact as the reduction that we're seeing within Eastwick. So just a few things that we are continuing to look at, and continuing with your feedback, with interaction with, again, all the federal agencies in the area. I think I will pass it back to Jay for some next steps.
All right, thank you, Jake. And so next steps, basically, we are still accepting comments on the draft report through mid-November. Please read the report. We will continue to evaluate the levee. As Jake said, there are some induced flooding impacts and complementary measures that we're looking at. Although they're minor, we're going to continue to evaluate the levee to, we'll optimize the levee height with that in mind. We'll continue to coordinate with the stakeholders, Delaware County, other townships, to make sure that we work towards a consensus on that and develop a final feasibility report in summer of 2024, as well as continuing to work with the city of Philadelphia or potential other partner to sign a partnership agreement. And after we go through the study process, we then do detailed design and construct the final plan that's included in that final feasibility report. So thank you. And I think with that, we want to turn over to Courtney for a question and answer.
Thank you, Jay and Jake. So we're gonna, Steve and I are going to help moderate this question, answer, and discussion. Just wanted to reiterate a couple of points and set some ground rules for our discussion. So as I mentioned earlier, we really want to make sure that Eastwick residents are getting priority in this conversation and opportunity to ask questions, particularly those that have been most impacted by flooding. But I don't know where everybody in this room lives, so I'm gonna ask you to use the honor system. And if you are not an Eastwick resident, please, if you don't mind holding your questions for a little bit so that we can make sure that residents get priority in this discussion. We're asking one person speaking at a time using this microphone. We'll pass the microphone around. You're welcome to stand if you feel comfortable doing so. We also have comment cards. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question in the microphone, we'll be handing out index cards so you can write a question and we can integrate that into the Q&A. When you speak, please identify yourself and if you are representing an organization or if you are representing yourself. So that we can make sure that enough people have time to ask questions. We are asking people to please keep your comments and questions under 2 minutes so we can maximize our time. We have, it's 6:25, so we have over 30 minutes for formal Q&A. But our speakers will be around for individual questions. If you don't get a chance to ask your question, or if you feel more comfortable having a one-on-one conversation, we will stick around until all the questions are answered to the best of our ability. Anything else, Steve?
Yeah, just I would add, if any of the Army Corps folks have those colored index cards that are outside, let me know and we'll give those to folks. Otherwise, you can just write stuff down and hand it to me and I'll read it aloud for everybody if you want to ask the question aloud. I guess we can jump into it with that.
Sorry, one thing I forgot. Taylor and Liz are passing out a survey. So before you leave, if you wouldn't mind filling out that survey, and we'll be collecting them at the door. We'd love to get your feedback. So before you leave, just please fill out the survey. Thank you.
All right, so this mic will be the sort of roving mic, so I'll come to you guys, but you would stand up, like you're inside, identify yourself. We're gonna start right here.
Oh.
The things that you're putting in place, how high will they be built? Because I was impacted and this is my first one. And it kind of into a roof. I had no help, but I had enough to cut.
Mm-hmm. So the question is, how high is the levee being built?
Yes.
The levee that's proposed.
Is going to be put in place.
Okay. Oh, the thing outside. Okay. Well, Jay can answer the question about the levee. Height of the levee.
Sure, so the levee is 1,400 feet long and it's gonna be 15 feet roughly high, so 15 feet. So as I showed on this graph here, thank you, Steve, that is significant enough height to at least reduce the flooding for a similar type of event that we've experienced in the past here at Eastwick.
And ma'am, so yeah, on this slide, you may have trouble seeing it, but the Floyd elevation is shown there. And there's some posters in the back that kind of have from the appendix of the report that kind of show homes and scale of a person, because that can be tough to conceptualize in terms of the elevation. The homes are higher, certainly than the levee. Next, I saw a hand go up right over here.
Christine Baker from the beginning. I want to know, are the HESCO barriers what you're putting up before? So have they been used in Philadelphia before? The HESCO barriers?
Right. So the question is, have the HESCO barriers been used in Philadelphia before? And the HESCO barriers are what we're looking at as an interim solution before the levee gets built. They have not been used in Philadelphia before, but they have been used in many sites in New York City and in many other places across the country and across the world. So the city of Philadelphia does not have experience installing and maintaining them. So we're learning from partners in other cities that have. And the woman that asked the question earlier, you had asked about the barriers outside, how tall. I'm not sure if the question was how tall the levee would be or how tall the interim barriers would be. The levee would be, is as proposed, is 15 feet. The HESCO barriers that we're looking at, they can be stacked. So right now they're 4 feet high and you can stack them as, I don't know how high, but we're looking at stacking 2 so that they would be 8 feet high. But we're currently doing the modeling to see what type of storm that would withstand, and how protective.
How high
this would
are
be.
they? You know,
That-
how tall are they?
They're 4 feet. They're 4 feet high, and then
Okay,
you
so
can,
we're talking
we're talking 8 feet high. Yeah.
That's not very high.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Johnson, 40 years in Eastwick. Before you said about first priority is, South Dakota, but I feel the first priority is for warning system.
It is for.
Warning system,
Warning.
because all this two floods with you, if it wasn't for each other, they would lost 2 cars. Prior to our houses, that's what it was. Yeah, another question I have to answer. EPA. The second flood, we had more of wood and water. So when they supplied, if they can put them in some kind of container, the dirt.
Can you
Well, the
repeat the
second flood,
Yeah.
with the EPA, when they working on 84th Street, they had a lot of dirt, different supplies that stacked up.
Oh, I see.
So when we were flooded, we in a flood area. The water hits that. And then we had more dirt than we had water at the second flood because the dirt comes from there.
Right.
So as long as it's taken for them to be working, this is going to continue. Can they put it in some kind of container if they can? Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So the first question was about a first priority besides fixing the flooding is alerting and early warning system. The Office of Emergency Management is working on an Eastwick specific alert system. It will likely be a text message based system that will provide specific messages catered to what Eastwick residents have said that they need to know. For example, where to move your car, when to evacuate, things like that. That system will be up and running fairly soon, but unfortunately, we don't have somebody from the Office of Emergency Management here today to talk specifics. But it's something that they have been working on, and usually at our events they just weren't available tonight. But that is something that we've been including as a short term, as an interim measure to make sure that people are aware of what's happening and have early access to information. The second question about the EPA construction zone and the dirt that's been piled on there. I can't speak specifically to that. I'm not sure. I don't think anybody in the room could at this moment, but that the EPA remediation of the landfill just over there will be complete this winter. They were able to fast track completion of the remediation because of the bipartisan infrastructure law funds. So that construction site will be, as far as I understand, it should be complete by the end of the year. So there should not be soil and stuff piled up much longer in that area. I hope that answers your question.
I've got 2 over here, then I'll jump.
There was one in the back too, or she's been working.
Very nice.
Hi, my name is Denise. I've been in this for 40 years as well, and I live on Vita Springs, which backs up to Saturn. And I've been asking the question of the city to get some type of a schedule of sewer cleanings, and that has not happened. And we have watched the flood waters go down like a bathtub on both of the tremendous floods that I have witnessed. And also I have asked, is there any consideration of upgrading our sewer systems to handle more? Because our main concern is our health also, and sewage went through our homes, not just dirt.
Thanks, Denise. Sorry to be unprepared, but we also don't have the water department here tonight since we're focused on the levee. So sorry that we can't answer that question specifically. The question was on the storm sewer network and if it could get upgraded to accommodate the flooding. We are going to try to make that a focus of our December town hall so that we can have somebody from the water department speak specifically to that, because I don't have all the answers readily available myself now. So we will continue to work with the water department and try to get more clarity on the schedule and the maintenance. What I know and can say is that the water department does have multiple inlets in Eastwick as like hotspots where they clean regularly before and after a storm. But I don't believe it's all of the inlets in Eastwick, and I know that's been something that's been requested. So it's something we're continuing to talk about, but I don't have a full answer for you tonight. But we'll try to bring it to the December town hall.
I've got a question over here, and then we're next.
Good afternoon. My name is Celestine Coben. I live on Morris Place. I have been here for over 40 years. We have been 4 generations of children and studies. I wrote a paper on this in undergrad, got a grade. I passed it on to someone with a master's. They passed it on to someone with a doctorate. My question is, you're telling me now this feasibility report will be ready, anticipated summer 2024. Plus, because it's not going, we'll probably have a feasibility study, but what happens in the meantime? All right, people talk about putting up these barriers, that's fine. But also you have to look at how Morris Place was constructed. On the odd side, there are trains. On the even side, there are no trains. And I'm talking about trains like in the construction of the houses. And I don't know whether that was done intentionally or whether it was put into a plan of being done. But how is the water flowing? I have been employed where our children were working at the airport and they came home and said, what flood? Because the water went down so quickly. And the water department came, put a little thing in the drain, and the water went down. I mean, if they were able to resolve the issue there on Cobb Street Parkway around Dunkin' Donuts in the cemetery, I can't see why it's taking so long for us to get a resolution. The second generation is between 44 and 51. Third generation is between 16 and 20. And the fourth generation, I think they're starting kindergarten and first grade. And for all this time, there's not an answer. We need to come to an answer. And the city knew about this before these houses were ever constructed.
Thank you, ma'am. And we hear you. And I'll just say for the Army Corps people, it's a high priority for us. So first site our new commander came to, he came from California for his new assignment. So we hear you. And that's all I'll say on that. Randy, you
Yeah, I can add, I mean, I don't think we have a good excuse why it's taking so long, but what is a very complicating factor is how much water comes into Eastwick from a very large area outside of the city of Philadelphia. The watershed that contributes all of that water that comes through Eastwick is a 70-something mile watershed that has a lot of suburban development, a lot of impervious surface, and a lot of that water comes rushing through and down through Eastwick. And so while the sewer system is designed to handle storm water on that is when rain is falling in Eastwick, it can't manage all of the water that's coming from that large watershed. So that's not what sewer systems and stormwater systems are designed to do. So it's not a stormwater issue, it's a watershed issue from a much larger area that's contributing down and coming down into Eastwick. So that's what makes it a much more complicated challenge. The potential solution of having a levee there is just blocking that water from coming through at that spot. But it doesn't change the fact that there's lots and lots of water coming down from that large watershed. So we're working with the tools that we have. We're expanding the toolkit and looking at other solutions and other mechanisms, but it is a really complicated and challenging issue. I know it's been a really long time and we don't have a good excuse for it to take this long, but it has been, every time I talk to somebody else about it, it is a very unique challenge that we have in Eastwick that we're really trying to still understand better. So can't say anything but sorry that it's been taking so
Hello, my name is Pamela Jones. I am a 30+ resident of the area, and I was here for Floyd, and I was here for 2021. When we had Floyd, I lived in Corman Suites at the 7900 block of Lindbergh. My concern is that, and now I'm at 82nd and Showing. My concern is that it seems as though the city of Philadelphia is not really involved. I'm not really concerned about going through the history of how we got here. I'm like, what are we going to do now? Would it help you all if we got together with our committee people and our ward leaders to apply pressure to the city to get them to help deal with this, because they are really underrepresented here, and I'm a city of Philadelphia employee.
I feel like I can't answer that question because I am a city employee. But would somebody else like to answer that question?
Well, should we compile a resource list of, you know, who we can call, who we can apply pressure to? We are about to get a new mayor, we need to take advantage of it.
Good question.
It is a good question. It's a very good question. Let me, can I think about that and come back with an answer? Let me put some, I don't want to give you the wrong answer. Let me think about that.
My name is Victor Salvatore. I moved here in 1972. And what these plans you guys have, is there a plan like for relocation or buyout of these houses? If this thing don't work? I mean, you have all these things, but it's gonna be a couple of years in the future. And 50 years, and it's still going on, so. Relocation buyout, what do you think?
Yeah. It's on the, we're keeping all options on the table right now. We have been looking more seriously at buyout and relocation. I will say the Army Corps has done a lot of work to put this study together, so we know a lot more about the levee than we do about other options. But buyouts and relocation have been put on the table and we are looking at them. I know a complication with buyouts that we have not figured out how to get around is that all attached homes have to participate together in order for the state to continue on with the buyout program happening. That's been a major constraint in the past. I know it's a major point of tension still. It's something that we hope to find a way around, but as of now, that is still the case, that if somebody wanted to buy out, the entire row would have to participate. If there is that level of interest though, from an entire row, we do want to know, and if that is a route that you want to pursue, we want to know that too. We are keeping that option on the table and we will look at that. I think from the material tonight, you have my contact information and I want to hear from you if this is something that you would really like us to look more into. There. Yeah, go ahead. Brenda.
Hey guys, Brenda with the Saturn Place. You guys do not know how glad I am to see you tonight. I welcome your participation 100%. This old woman feels good that walking up and down those steps that y'all came out. But having said that, I need you to know about all the options that are out here for you. I heard you talking about the buyout. I heard about the levee, but I have someone here from Hines to talk about the natural based solution where we can redirect water through pipes if he doesn't mind. And if it's not going to take away from the program. And Lamar, can you come up here and talk to the residents out here, if you don't mind? Just and thank you guys for listening. I thank you for your participation. Look, I've been out here for 50 some years, okay? And I'm in repetitive blood. And if I can be quiet and listen to all the solutions, help me, guys, help me. Lamar, let's hear what you have to say and hoping that the city is going to put into this as well.
Thank you, Brent. I'll give you a very quick summary because I think we got a lot of other questions on these other things, on the levy and buyouts and such. So we've been looking at and going after funding for what we call nature-based solutions. And all that is using the landscape to try to figure out how to deal with problems that are happening within communities like this. And in this particular case, flooding. And so that would be using, and we don't know yet what it would be, because we still need to take a look at the hydrology. We need to take a look at the least hazardous distance on where you can move water to. But we're looking at how do you move water from where it's coming out right here in this community, and you move it to other green spaces, either A, over ground, or you use pipes to move the water, and you move it down to from one green storage space to another green storage space, and ultimately down to where the Hines National Wildlife Refuge is at. So that's what we're looking at. That's the very short version of that. And I have a lot of other partners that I'm working with. I've talked to the city about this, the Corps, and some of you in the community have come to meetings and we've discussed this too. Brenda actually asked me recently if I could do a session, and I would bring a hydrologist with me who knows this very well. If we did that, if I would host a session here to talk more fully about nature-based solutions. Now, I think that some modified version, and I'm talking to the Corps about this, and we're going to talk more about this, some modified version of levee combined with a nature-based solution could work. So that's going to take some time, but if you don't have time, I do believe that the HESCO barriers will help some as we try to get somewhere. But I think we still need to do some conversations and make some modifications to see if we can get to a better place.
And I would just add to that real quick, thank you, Lamar, that the Army Corps doesn't view the levee. If the city decided they wanted to move forward with the levee, we don't view that as a standalone thing. We understand that partners and others could be doing other things within the region to mitigate flooding, related, unrelated, on that topic. So thank you for that.
So maybe I'll just like make a plug again for what I mentioned in the beginning, that we'll be starting this flood resilience strategy process where we can learn what options you want us to move forward with and put you in the decision-making table to decide, do we want to do a buyout program, to do on a relocation, do we want to move the water? What are the options on the table and how do we want to move forward? The levee can be part of that strategy, or it can be something that happens sooner depending on, well, in terms of the decision, it's going to take a while to happen, but in terms of the decision, it might happen before we're fully through the strategy, depending on if we're getting a lot of interest in the levee. So there's a lot of conversations that I think we need to have to make sure that we're hearing all the options on the table and moving forward with what you want to see happen. So we'll, just a reminder that we'll be starting that process early next year.
I got one in the back here.
Hi, my name is Burnett. My name is Raymond Burnett. I live right across the street from the playground. Our houses, our driveways sink down. So water comes straight out. We get like 5-6 feet of water in our house. This whole block, I got a short video on my phone where the water is receding, but it's always still past 4 feet high from the last flood. Yeah. Flowing, we had like 5.5, 6 feet of water in our rec room. I had 3 dry steps from out of 11, 12 steps I had water from my rec room to my kitchen. We need something done soon as possible, not 24, 25. Some of us might not be alive. But we need something done. That's the bottom line. They have been talking about dredging. I had heard this at when the first flood. Seems to me if they dredge the creek, that would solve a whole lot of problems. And then use your little levees or whatever you want. We need something done
talking ain't doing nothing but making people mad. Serious. We've been through this. We stood out there on Lindbergh Boulevard and blocked the intersection till Rendell came out here when he was the governor. And look at him now. He on his last leg. We just need something done out here. You know what I mean? Since it seems like since the situation changed, with more black people out here, we get lost in the sauce. But our taxes keep going up. That's the whole deal. So if I offended one of y'all, I'm very sorry.
So just an observation, this is really great, getting everyone together at these public meetings. And I've heard, many individuals state their concerns about flooding. And so what's really special to me about this community is you have a bunch of groups, Eastwick United and EC, and I was talking to Ramona. So you guys have the collective interests together. And Corey can speak to this more, but I'm sure you brought your interests to your congresspeople, excuse me, and the city. So you got impetus, you got the groups, and just keep on raising your voices and meeting with your congressmen in the city.
My name is Terry Williams, and I was born out there. So my experience with flooding goes back a very long time. My question to a lot of you technical folks is that when you get to the point that you're about to do your analysis as to what the solutions are, sometime around 2024 or whatever, how comprehensive is that going to be? Because even here, we hear many different concerns. Of course, the cleaning out the drains, putting up the barriers, dealing with whatever's happening at the Hines. There are a number of moving parts to this, and will, in fact, your analysis be comprehensive enough to take in all of these concerns, and so that the community can get a sense of just how broad your technical approach will be, and quite possibly considering all of these concerns, folks might get an idea of whether or not this is going to work. But I think that all of these concerns, the city, state, federal governments, all of that needs to be included, as opposed to just looking at what the Army Corps is doing.
Thanks for the question. I'm not sure where to start with that. I agree, and I want to mention again that we want to keep all of the options on the table and develop a comprehensive solution. And that's what we are intending to do with the flood resilience strategy, to make sure that we understand the complexities of each of the individual measures that are on the table and how they can come together to create a more complete picture. In terms of how comprehensive the technical pieces are, is that a question that you want the Army Corps to answer in terms of their levee feasibility study?
Well, when will all these agencies come together and say, sit around and say, hey, look, this is our recommendation. The bar graciously came up with an idea that I had never heard of. And, you know, the young lady had mentioned, you know, the drains, cleaning out
Yeah.
all our drains in the hot spots.
Mhm.
Okay, in addition to the berm and the levee.
Yeah.
Okay, and, will all of these,
Yeah.
in the final analysis of this lengthy study, will all come together at some point.
Yeah.
To, let folks know, even you technicians, will all come together to some point where in fact it will suggest that all these solutions feed into, you know, all these situations feed into solutions.
Yeah.
Okay, that is common sense, logical,
Mhm.
and really, let's really know, basically, the water came from here, and this is where the water's gonna go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. Thank you. And it makes me want to like hire you to work with us on this strategy. So that is exactly what we are aiming to do with the flood resilience strategy in terms of the interagency coordination to get there. That has already started happening and we've been starting. I meet with interagency folks monthly, city, state, and federal level. And then we also have quarterly leadership meetings where we've had the councilman come out, Congressman Scanlon's been in those meetings as well, where we try to sit together to understand what are all of these options that are on the table and how can we accelerate the ones that are ready to go or what needs more work. Ultimately, what we're hoping to achieve with the flood resilience strategy is bringing those options to the table and having residents decide what moves forward instead of the government folks deciding how to move forward. So what we've been working on over the past couple of years is better understanding all of those options and bringing the understanding of them to the table. But what we want to do next is have residents decide how those measures move forward and in what combination. Does that answer your question? Not really.
I got one.
We're working on it.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a neighbor and my name is Stacy Ford. Been in the neighborhood for, well, hold on, I'm not gonna do the adding, since 1977. And I've also had an opportunity to support many of my neighbors that have been impacted by the current flooding. So I've heard a lot of stories, heard a lot of frustration. I've witnessed people's unfortunate situations that has caused them stress due to post-traumatic stress whenever it drizzles or it rains. So you have a group of people who have been beat up for decades, not just by the weather, but by the lack of response and action to prevent that beat up, as well as high flood insurance policies. So I say that just to give you a sense of why I'm speaking today, but I have a question about the levee, since that's what we're here to talk about. And if in fact, there was a rain event like the one that was in New York last week, would this levee protect my neighbors and me from severe flooding that they saw in New York?
Jake, do you want to weigh in there?
So I mentioned earlier, we're currently sizing the levee for a 1 in 100 or 1% chance flood or 100-year event, which is bigger than the event you just mentioned. It's a very significant event on the order of Floyd. So you saw the table up there. Our current levee would protect against any flood that you've seen so far.
And how would that impact the people in the lane right there? You know what you said, so it's a projection, but how would that actually impact other people that live here? Because, you know, there's, I mean, I know that people live, but
But they've been going through many of them now.
Yeah, absolutely, right, so that's what I was trying to get at with some of that induced flooding discussion. Right now, those numbers are a target for us to reduce to zero moving forward. You know, Lamar spoke, you know, we've talked offline multiple times about potential for those additional measures or complementary measures to go along with the levee that would help to mitigate or soften those, hopefully reduce to zero. So we're not doing that. We're not flooding someone else by protecting Eastwick. That's the goal of our analysis moving forward. So we've dialed in to see what those impacts are, and that gives us a target for reduction.
Thank you, ma'am. We've got about 5 minutes left for questions. I've got one here in the back. And just important to note again, we're not going anywhere. So you can flag down people from the city, Army Corps, FEMA, other agencies, other organizations here with us today. So I got one right here.
I just have a real quick question. I'm on 80th and Shelburne. My father moved there back in 1977. I've been living there in the home. I just wanted to know, you mentioned something about a watershed. Okay, this watershed that's in the suburbs, how long has it been there for? That's what I wanted to know. And can they move that watershed so it can't come into the city? And I was just surprised in 1999 when Floyd came through. I didn't know anything about flooding. When was the last big flood before Floyd? That's what I wanted to know, because I think, you know, as residents, we were all just totally shocked. And as the young lady said here, I just want to know also, you know, where would the water be diverted to? And of course, we wouldn't want anyone else to be impacted. Also, I don't know about anyone else, but since Floyd, when it rains, I get nervous. I'm up at night. I don't know, you know. Since Floyd, my sister lives on 80th and Mars, and I'm like, I'll call her and say, did you talk to anyone on Saturn? Is any water coming through? Because I could be at work or something. And so it's just nerve wracking. So when was the last big flood before Floyd? And what about this watershed? How long has it been there for?
I'll start with the first one there. So when we talk about flooding and measured floods that we know about, the gauges that the USGS, another federal agency, maintains on Darby Creek, they go back to in the 60s, I believe. There were no floods in the recorded record from 60 up until now that approached Floyd. So that is the flood of record. I don't have a history beyond, you know, when we look at analysis, we use observed gauge records, and we sometimes use previous floods to inform, you know, qualitatively some of that. But without observed records, we don't know how far back. Likely 99 is definitely. Yeah.
Yep.
199. Was the 100-year flood?
Yes, it
That
was.
was 700 flood. That wasn't 100 years.
That came after.
That came after.
That came after.
Yeah.
Let's keep it proud.
Yeah, we account for every flood that we can in our analysis, including the largest flood, you know, across the board, but multiple floods, not just one particular.
And it's a complex probability question you're asking. You could have a 100-year flood twice in a row, or you're not have it for many years. It's a hard concept. It's struggle to communicate.
Yeah.
I got one here. We have maybe time for two more.
I just.
The watershed question.
I wanted to say hi, I'll try and answer the watershed question and maybe talk about 1% flood. My name is Mike Carroll. I'm the Deputy Managing Director for the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. I work with the Office of Sustainability. I work with the Office of Sustainability. I also work with the Water Department. So I caught the feedback about the drains. I'm gonna go back talk to the water commissioner, see if we can come up with a game plan there. Watersheds. So watersheds a natural feature. It's sort of like, hills, forests, mountain ranges. Watersheds are the network of streams, the creeks, the rivers, the gullies that feed water to a single point. We're going to be concerned about, the Schuylkill River and the confluence with the Delaware River. So the watershed we're talking about here starts in the suburbs, but it's not something anyone build. It's not like a shed behind your house. It's just where the water comes down and it all starts to come together little by little. And, we really, for what we're talking about, can't do anything to change that natural feature. Maybe in the long term, there's a conversation to have about something like that, whether there's some really heavy infrastructure, and maybe climate change will bring that conversation to the fore, but that's a ways off. So that's not really what we're talking about here. 100-year flood, 500-year flood. I think somebody said it. We shouldn't be using these terms anymore. We should be talking about the percent. So the percent chance in any year of getting a 100-year flood is 1%. And like it was mentioned, you can hit the lottery, the bad lottery, a couple years in a row, and have 200-year floods. And if we're talking about 100 years, people are like, well, why don't we get two of them 2 years in a row? But the fact is, what we considered 1% 30 years ago, we don't consider 1% anymore because of climate change, sea level rise, you name it. These things are all contributing to how we would think about that would happen. Again, just hi. I'm really happy that everybody has come together. We get the feedback. You guys want to see some action. And what I'll say is we certainly understand that, and we also understand, I think what was pointed out before, the trauma. And it's like year after year and nobody seems like they're paying attention. So this is going to take some time. I just need to be clear with everybody about that. And that doesn't feel great because it's taken a lot of time to get here, right? But the fact is that we can't just do it, because what you do should be coordinated. Like what you do should be effective. It shouldn't just be doing something. It has to make some sense. It has to have a logic, like was spoken in the past. So that means we have to make sure that we're clear what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the effects are, and what was also message before. If we're doing something that's helping these people over here, well, what about those people? Is it making their lives worse? Is it making their flooding worse? And so we need to really think that through. We need to be honest with everybody. Like, what is the end result for you? And then if there's something we can do to make that better for you, or if you're worse off, we need to get you to buy into that as best we can. So that's why we have to talk a little bit more before we start to do. But we are determined to do. And I just appreciate the feedback we get from people that we don't deserve a medal, and I don't deserve a medal, but it sounds like folks are recognizing that we're present. Like we're doing this, right? And we weren't doing this 4 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago like we needed to be. So, much longer, much slower than it should be. I can recognize that. But I really appreciate everybody being here, bringing the passion and then sharing the feedback, and we'll keep working on it. So I'm just back with Corinne.
Your name, we need to come together as a community so that the next time we have our information.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Carroll, for that. We're gonna close the open portion here, but we're not going anywhere if you want to have sidebar conversations. Thanks for coming out tonight. We want your comments, so please email them in. And don't forget about, you want to talk about your.
If you got the survey, please make sure you hand it to one of us so that we get your survey. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.